Young, Mr. Schaefer, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Hamud,
Good morning, present.
Dr. Carnell, Vice Chair Thomas, Chair Pinkins.
Present.
You have a quorum present.
Thank you, Ms. Spivey. Okay, moving on to the next item of our agenda, which is item B, the approval of the August 17, 2022 meeting minutes. I believe everyone has had the opportunity to receive a copy of the meeting minutes at this time and had time to review them. And at this time, are there any questions or concerns regarding those meeting minutes? If there are none, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the meeting minutes into the record.
So moved.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, so moved. Moving on to the next item of our agenda, which is unfinished business. This is item number 1, under C1, update from the subcommittee, amendments to the ethics ordinance. Mr. Thomas, I believe this was your subcommittee, sir. Are you prepared with a report today, sir?
Yes, I do.
Turn your microphone, sir.
Approximately 2 weeks ago, Mr. Longstreet circulated to all members of the board the draft that we worked on and that we produced. We went through the work that was done by the prior group. It's my understanding that it was the full board that went through that, the first set of recommendations regarding changes. We use that as our basic starting point. And from there, we came up with our recommendations. I will tell you, I believe that we probably incorporated somewhere around 75 to 80% of all of the prior changes that had been suggested. It has been my understanding that although those changes had been submitted to the Board of Commissioners at some point in time, no action was taken on it. So we sort of started anew. And we came up with some ideas. We looked around to see what a couple other states did on certain issues. And I believe that the one thing that you need to know is this. The subcommittee consisting of myself, Mr. Schaefer, Ms. Lewis, and aided by Mr. Longstreet, everything that we've suggested was all unanimous. I feel that that's important to point out. There wasn't disagreement. Where there was disagreement, what we did is we went back and we said, well, what can we do to work out the disagreement? So in looking it over today, I can tell you, I think that it covers all of the issues that we're aware of at this time. I don't believe that it's going to be viewed as a perfect document by anybody. Maybe even some of the members of the subcommittee might have made other suggestions here or there. But what I would say is this. This to me is more than a starting point. I believe it's really close to what this board needs. We've addressed, for example, the board's investigative authority and what would happen if this board felt that investigation needed to be done that required assistance from Mr. Longstreet beyond his office, outside of his office. Example, hiring a private investigator. We included that possibility in there. We addressed the issue of who's going to pay for that, how that's going to be paid for. We also tried to address some other issues that have come up along the way. Some of them were raised by other members, some were raised by myself, like disqualification of a board member. We don't have any rule on that right now. I don't know how the entire board is going to feel about it, but we felt it was necessary for somebody that comes before the board to have the right and the guidance on how to move to recuse a member of the board. So we included that in there. And there were some other things that are so basic. I think that I almost don't know how they've been overlooked. And I don't know how the whole board is going to view the concept of swearing in witnesses. But to me, when I look at what we do, the importance of what we do, we get in a complaint, we have to make a judgment on it. We have to take testimony. We have to review documents. It's almost, I don't know, it just doesn't seem very fair to anybody accused of wrongdoing or anybody accusing someone of wrongdoing. The witnesses are not sworn. And I will tell you, we looked around. Mr. Longstreet did some research and other states provide for that. And then we had to worry about what mechanism we would do that under. How do we swear? So we had to have somebody have the power to swear witnesses. So we came up with the concept that it would be done by the chair or the chair's designee. Same with the motion to disqualify. A motion to disqualify would be brought before the member. If somebody moved to disqualify me, it would be brought before me. If I deny the motion to disqualify, well, then it has to be reviewed by the chair or the chair's designee. And we look to the Michigan court rules regarding disqualification of judges and swearing of witnesses, and we got a lot of ideas from there. And so with all of that said, I think that we made a good faith attempt to come up with an amended ethics code that the board could consider. So now it's up to everybody to consider it. And I think we've accomplished that. I think that there was a lot of hard work done by Ms. Lewis, by Mr. Schaefer, by Mr. Longstreet. And I think we came up with it. So with all that said, I think that I would feel a little more comfortable just answering questions that anybody might have. I'm sorry that Mr. Schaefer and Ms. Lewis aren't here today because I'm sure they would have had some important comments to make, but I'll try to answer any questions that anybody has. But I really believe that what we've tried to do is come up with a proposal that not only tries to address issues that we're facing now, but kind of looks forward. We don't have any hearings scheduled right now, but that could change. That could change next month. And that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to be forward looking. So I'll answer any questions that anybody might have.
Okay, thank you for that report, Mr. Thomas, and thank you for the good work of the subcommittee led by yourself. And although Mr. Schaefer and Ms. Lewis is not here today, we also want to extend our congratulations and our gratitude for the hard work that you all have done. So at this time, I'm going to open up to other board members, I believe, and I see Mr. Schaefer just walking in there. So he is here. Good morning, sir. Let the record reflect that Mr. Schaefer has just joined us. Mr. Schaefer was just going over the report from the subcommittee. And so we're going to go ahead and open it up to the board to ask any questions that they may have. I think at this time, everyone has received a copy of the recommendations for the amendments to the ethics ordinance and have had the opportunity to review them. If you haven't, say so at this time. But if you have any questions or concerns, I think we just heard Mr. Thomas's report as chairperson of the subcommittee. So if anyone has any questions or concerns at this time, we're going to open it up. Ms. Hammoud.
Yes, first and foremost, I want to thank the committee. I know it's a lot of work. And I saw that you adopted most of the previous and you added what you just mentioned. So thank you for, all your work and for drafting the additional items. I do have just a few clarifying questions. So,
Okay.
and some of them is like minor. It's not like, So on page 2, it says official at the bottom of the page, you changed like action to official act. And it's in section 40-3, part of the definitions. So I want to give you a chance to.
Could you clarify for me where you're at? I'm on page 2.
Yep, page 2 towards the end where it says county decision. Let me make sure that because it depends on which page 2, the one with the changes or not. So, okay, it's actually page 2, part of the marked up document because we had 2 documents. So sorry. Yeah, page 3. You did change official action taken to official act. I believe that's what you mentioned, like what you meant. Now, the way, in my version, the way in the packet. Do you have the packet for the ethics board?
Do I have the original?
No, the packet that was sent to us, this is what I pulled, and on page 3, in the last paragraph, again, it's like just correction, not a big deal, but I just want to make sure. So do you see?
I have to step over there. May I step over by you,
Yes.
Mr. Malou? I don't have a mask on.
And again, because we had the redacted one,
Okay.
and yeah, okay, not the redacted, the marked up one. So here you go, so here. I think you meant to put act, and there's like an I remained in there, but I don't know if it came into the final version.
Oh, take the eye out. I see.
Okay, so that's one, yes,
typo.
exact typo, that's, I'm like, so it's on
I
page
has to
3.
come out.
And related to this, like on the following page, because I don't know what page is going to be in your version,
Okay.
where part of the definition section, when the definition of personal gain, it does reference the official action in there. So if you change the definition to be an official act, I just wanna, I guess, have a question. Should this be an official act or should it stay as action? So this is just, again, clarification, wording, typo. I just want to make sure what you propose in there.
Oh, you know, I have to step over.
Sure.
Can I come over there by you, Ms. Samu? I'll sit right
Absolutely.
next to you.
So Mr.
May I do that? No objection?
Mr. Thomas, that's actually on the very next, on actually page number 4. So on the page 4, under down, we say official action or official duties. That's what she's talking about. So here you have official action or official duties. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
And so what she said is on the other page, on page 2, we just discussed, you change it from official action to official act. And she's saying here, should this also be changed to official act as well as opposed to official action? Because it still says official action or official duties.
I would have no problem with the change. I don't really know that it's mandatory or necessary, but that's a very minor thing and
Right.
we'd go along with that. Mr. Schaefer and I are both nodding our head.
I'm okay as well. I just
Okay.
want to know if it's not like something you intended to change and got missed, that's all.
Well, I tell you,
For
Mr.
consistency.
Longstreet, I know you're keeping track of these suggestions.
I'm fine either way. I just put in my notes for what I
Gotcha.
noticed.
No, this is helpful.
Okay, so the following section, and again, part of the definition, public servant. I know before we discussed in the previous committee to have something specific that the ethics board has no jurisdiction when we have a complaint against a judge. So if that's the case, should we include in the public servant definition to exclude judges of Wayne County?
I don't see that as being necessary because we have procedures for handling that. But let me say this, if there was a feeling that that should go in here, but we clearly don't have jurisdiction over judges. And if you feel that, where would that be? What heading is that under?
In the public servant definition, we felt like we can make it clear because we did have a couple, complaints before filed. So I just don't want people to go through like the notary public and, filling out forms when they know we can't do anything about it.
Okay, well, what page are you on?
It's gonna be page 6. under
Page
public
6, okay.
servant.
Pardon me? Well, you know what, to address Ms. Hamud's concerns, we could put in there excluding judges. We put parentheses excluding judges, if that's acceptable to you.
That was one of the recommendations that we had before, and I had a note about it. So it's obviously up to the board, but
And just from the chair, it does seem somewhat confusing to someone who looks at this, because if you say an elected official, or judges are elected. So I think that there does need to be some clarification as to let a person know that judges are excluded.
It could go right after the word official in the second line. If that's the suggestion, parentheses excluding judges, and parentheses.
find a page for the
That's all
next
right.
one.
Take your time.
Okay, page 16
16.
and item 2, I think you're changing the or to an and. And I have question to why not keep the or. And in that same paragraph, I know we had a situation, and I know like the second paragraph addressed like the transfer. Actually, one of my, like the recommendation that I had noted before, where it says a relative or domestic partner may not be hired. Like my recommendation would be to say also here or transferred. However, if the employment would, and it says create a direct or indirect supervisor subordinate relationship with the public servant. I think that by itself should be sufficient for not hiring or transferring an employee, because if a relative, even if it's direct or indirect, they should not be supervising, because there will be a review. And we had a case where someone complained about someone had favorable reviews and promotion recommendation. And it brought up favoritism because that person was indirectly reporting to a relative. So I think in that situation, I would highly recommend keeping the or, because that first one should be by itself sufficient for not hiring or transferring someone in the same department with a relative.
So what you would want to do is just go back to the word or. I'm not
Yes.
even certain that that's what the first group had done on it, but what you're saying makes sense, and I certainly would have no problem with that.
Okay.
It's grammatical, and I think it clarifies it a little bit. So I don't know how Mr. Schaefer or anybody else or Chair Pinkins feels, but I think it's a good idea to go back to the word or. But that's how everybody feels.
So on the same thing, then item number 4, then we can go back and keep the or rather than the and, unless someone
Well, in
objects.
4, could you tell me where that would be? There.
So item number 4, just before 2I, it says subordinate, so a direct or indirect supervisor / subordinate relationship between the employees, or an actual conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest. So I would
You're
keep the
saying
or.
that You're just go back to the word or?
Yeah.
Makes sense since we did it in the prior paragraph.
Just from the chair,
Sure.
would anyone have a concern with keeping the and the or? And or, therefore you're covered on both. If any contingencies were to come up, it's and or.
In my mind, I mean, as long as you have the or, it's covering because it's each one of them is sufficient to create basically that conflict. So it doesn't have to be with something else. It's not like you're combining the first factor and the second factor. That's my concern. Like my concern, hey, yeah, it is indirect or direct employment, but we don't have conflict. That's what my concern was. I mean, if you have direct supervisory, I don't want somebody say, well, unfair, I didn't do favoritism, I reviewed them appropriately. I would say just keep the or. If this or this is there, then, it's a violation of this ethics code.
I
Agree.
really
I don't
don't think
mind.
that either way would be a strain to have it. I really don't. I think you should just make a decision. What Chair Pinkins has said is
My
not.
opinion would be to keep the or, but
Okay. How does
I will
everybody
go
feel
with
about it?
whatever the rest of the board members.
From the chair, I do understand Ms. Hamou's point, because as I had mentioned, if you have and, as she's saying, you have to have both to happen and or this happen. What she's saying is either one should be able to happen, to be able to occur for there to be it. Either you have this or you have that, and therefore it's a conflict. But if you have and, then it means that you have to have both for there to be a conflict. So I understand where you're coming from there.
Again, I'm not the
So do I.
attorney.
So do I. That's what we're
So,
here for. No,
Okay.
if that's what's being suggested. If nobody has an objection, the or. Mr. Pinkins, how do you feel about just going with the or?
I think the or is okay. I would agree from the chair. I would okay.
I think we
I'd
go
be
back
okay with
to the or.
Ms. Hamou, you still have the floor.
I'm just scrolling to the next section. Okay, on page 22, the term of office, because we have staggering terms, I think we talked about clarifying the term. So there is here, and I'm on item 5, term of office. The members of the board shall be appointed for terms of 4 years and may serve up to 2 consecutive terms. We talked before to say, should this be up to 8 years? Or in case someone has not a full term, should this be clarified to include full terms? It would be then 2 full term, 2 consecutive full terms. So either like someone like me, I entered my first term started 2016. So this would be my second term. Am I term limited, or can I go for another 4 years, or my second term will end in 2 years? So we need to clarify that. So either we can have it up to 8 years, or we can have it consecutive to full terms.
Well, the only thing I would say about your comments are this is one where the prior group didn't suggest any changes and we didn't
Right.
suggest any changes. But what I would say would be this. My concern would be with what you're suggesting. What if a person picked up a term after 1 year? I'm just
Mhm.
throwing this out.
Yes.
Well, then you'd have to change it to 9 years, I mean, I really don't know. I think that it's something that should be talked about, but we didn't address that. So
Mhm.
what are you suggesting? Where does the 8 years come from? I guess you're assuming that there would be You were
partial
appointed
term.
Midway. You were appointed midway, yeah.
Right, a
Midway.
partial term. So, like in my notes, and you're correct, we did not put it, it didn't make it to the marked up when we did it last time. So I think it needs to be clarification. We discussed the 8 years, and because of what you just said, like, okay, so the next person or the next term should be a partial term or not. I think it makes sense if someone is like appointed, that they would finish the term. So I think instead of keep changing the years, we would clarify it, it's full terms. So this way, like when they, like 2 consecutive full terms, then if somebody, may end up, if they get elected for a partial term and after 1 year, so they may end up 8 plus 3. So be it. It's just, I want to make sure it's clarified. I mean, I think it deserves to be clarified. But again, it's up to the subcommittee, how you feel about it and the rest of the board.
Well, I don't know what, I think that the committee here
Mhm.
is on equal footing with all the members, with
Mhm.
you and Dr. Carnell and Chair Pinkins. I really don't know about how that would work. Look at Chair Pinkins, Mr. Slezak has his hand up over there.
Yes, Mr. Slezak. Excuse me.
Through the chair, this is Joe Slezak, a legislative policy analyst with the commission. One of the challenges we faced in the mid 2010s is the board went inactive. And we basically had to rebuild the board essentially. And what we did was, kind of our logic was that because the original terms were staggered, that we didn't want basically all the terms to turn over at once. We didn't want to say that, okay, everyone restarts at the same time, so therefore you have the 4s. So that's why we did the partials, just so everyone would stagger. That was our determination. That's how we restarted the board.
I'm not sure that addresses Ms. Amoud's concern. Ms. Amoud's concern is the situation where somebody is appointed to fill an existing term. I don't want to use death, but somebody resigns for whatever reason. They're 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years into a term. So you're going to have an odd number of years in there. And then I guess the question would be, would the person appointed to fill out the 1 year, the 2 year, or the 3 year partial term get to be appointed for 2 full terms? I don't know what the answer is to that.
Or should then the 2 consecutive terms, whether it's a partial term or full term, it's the term, even if they serve 1 year. Then this way, if someone goes 1 year and then they have another full term, then they're out, term limited. I think that it needs a clarification. I know we discussed it. We didn't make it last time with the markup, so I just want to bring it up. And maybe it's up to the commission. I mean, I know we're not approving those and we have to send them back to Wayne County anyway. So we can make recommendation or we can leave it and then they can make their own recommendation.
Yes, Dr. Carnell.
Mike is.
Terms, you mean?
Terms. Oh, it just doesn't turn red. Is that what's going? I'm looking at the wrong thing. Thank you. 2 full consecutive terms, regardless of when a person comes on board. And then the rest of the language could be eliminated.
So I think what I'm understanding is that we can add in, may serve up to 2 full consecutive terms. Because if a person is appointed to fulfill a person's position who had left the board, that person is appointed to 4 years. So even though it may have been a year or 2 or 3 years left on the person who left term, the person who's coming in to fulfill that term is appointed 4 years, my understanding, or are they just
No.
appointed to fulfill the remaining portion of the person who left?
That's correct.
That's correct. That's how, yeah. When I
Okay,
came
then the
in,
chair is
it
correct.
would be just ending with that partial term.
Okay, so then that will mean they will get two more terms then, two more terms after they fulfill that term, or would that cut into the terms that they're to serve? If they serve a partial term, do they get another two full terms, or do they get a
That's
term
what
and a
we're
half?
proposing. Yes, that's correct. That's what we are
That's-
proposing. Two
that's correct.
full consecutive terms, regardless of when you are appointed to the board.
That
Have
would
some
do.
language to consider already.
Yeah, that'll be some language we'll need to add into here, because yeah, that is somewhat confusing. I was under the impression that if a person is appointed, they are appointed to fulfill not only the term of the person who left the board. I understood that they just came in, they got appointed to 4 years, and then they had another consecutive 4 years after that. But if you're saying they can fulfill the person who's left's term and also get an additional 2 full terms, then you're right. They could serve more than 8 years. It could be 10 years, 11 years, 12,
Right.
13, or 11. So that would need to be some language inserted in there to some.
Well, if that's what you want, if that's what the board wants to do, it could be cleaned up by right, the second line down, up to 2 full consecutive terms and any partial term that they may have been appointed to. So you'd add the word full after the word two. And then after terms at the end of that sentence, and any partial term that they were, that the board member was appointed to fill. So could I read that for the record, the full sentence, the way I'm suggesting it?
Yes, read it for the record, Mr. Thomas. Thank you.
Term of office, the members of the board shall be appointed for terms of 4 years and may serve up to 2 full consecutive terms and any partial term that that the board member may have been appointed to. Did you get it, Mr. Longstreet? Got it? If everybody is satisfied with that, I think that addresses that concern. I don't know how the Board of Commissioners will feel about it, because somebody could be serving up to several years. I mean, depending on what's left on the partial term, but I'll go along with it. I think it's fair. It's reasonable.
At this time, all members are in favor of the language that was just read regarding the terms of office? Are there any issues with respect to the language that was just put in? Mr. Longstreet, did you get that word for word, or do you need to repeat that?
The term of office, the members of the board shall be appointed for a term of 4 years and may serve up to 2 consecutive terms, and the remainder of any partial term the board member is appointed to.
I think it was 2 full consecutive terms. Am I correct there?
Any-
Yes, 2
Sir-
full
I'll read it again. Term of office. The members of the board shall be appointed for 4 years and may serve up to 2 full consecutive terms, and the remainder of any partial term the board member is appointed to.
Objections to the language that was just read?
Good.
Favor of the language that was just read?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm assuming after, like, we're gonna adopt all the changes.
That's correct.
Okay, so,
Want to make sure that everyone is clear on the language that was just read, because at the end of this, we will vote to adopt or not to adopt the changes, but I just want to make sure we're clear on the language.
Fine.
Okay, all right.
Should I read it again for clarification?
I think it's in the record. I think.
Very good.
Okay, I think Ms. Hamou still has the floor, though. She had some other issues, so. Ms. Hamou?
And I'm on page 24 and item number 3. Towards the end where it says in the event of a criminal referral, all deadlines for the board to respond are stayed until a response is received from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And then I see the addition here, the board may request a status report on all referrals, on an annual basis. I like that. The other thing we said, maybe like for us to close our cases because we had some referrals. We had suggested when it says a response is received, maybe to add something like confirmation from the Wayne County that they received our referral. So this way we're not waiting to close like a case that we referred there, as long as their investigation or, other process that the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office need to do. So if we refer it and we confirm that they receive it, then we should just basically dismiss it on our part and close that complaint. So this way we won't have an open complaint year after years if criminal investigation is still going.
Well, it depends on how everybody feels about it, but
Right.
my question would be, that's sort of presupposing that the board is willing to go along with whatever the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office decides, unless you're carving out adding in some type of language. Are you suggesting that once the board receives word from the prosecutor's office that they got the referral, that it's going to be closed by the board?
Because that's what I'm suggesting, yes. In the past, like we had certain, complaints and like the board, we said, okay, we can't make a decision on it because we need those to be referred. If it's in a criminal, if it is in a criminal nature, we're not the prosecutor's office. There's jurisdiction of the prosecutor's office to investigate. So we had situations where we referred, but the problem is sometimes like we can't wait until what the prosecutor's office gonna do. So what should you keep the case open with us as well? Or should we close it once we know that, okay, we referred it to the prosecutor's office, or in our case, like our attorney get confirmation that the prosecutor's office received that case? Should we then basically hand it to them, or do you want to keep it with the board?
Well, the only thing I would say about that is, and I want to be very candid with you, that is something that we discussed. And I think that
Yeah.
if the allegation was that a serious felony, heavens forbid, that a murder was committed, that's something very clearly that the board wouldn't have any authority over. But I don't know about a misappropriation. We have a complaint in front of us today that alleges that. So I don't know. I think that the way we tried to craft this was the board has options. The board could do many things. The board, if the thing drags on with the prosecutor's office for a number of years, we could request referrals. But I'm just not certain that every time a referral is made to the prosecutor's office, that the board is going to be in a posture where they want to say, we're not doing anything on this, no matter what the prosecutor does. This leaves some options for the board.
If I may,
I'll go along with how everybody feels. Yeah.
what I would suggest is I think that a Wayne County prosecutor's investigation and a ethics board investigation or answer to complaint can occur simultaneously. Because I believe any criminal act that violates this statute, violates the ethics code, would also be a matter for the ethics board to deal with. So I think a referral to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office can go towards any criminal investigation. But also at the same time, the ethics board can also continue in its work as well, depending on what the allegations are, such as a misappropriation of funds, malfeasance, whistleblower, violation of whistleblower, conflict of interest, those things can still be dealt with while a criminal investigation is occurring. And I think actually, if worked in conjunction, they can help each other in a sense.
Their point would be, what if the board wanted to just wait to see what the prosecutor's office did? We just wanted to see what they did.
Then I think the matter would just be stayed.
And then 6 months later, 8 months later, the determination is made by the prosecutor's office that they can't prove the case by beyond a reasonable doubt, so they're not going to file charges. But the board may want to look into the matter. So there's the situation that you've raised where there's a simultaneous investigation by both offices. And the other situation could be where the board wants to see what the prosecutor's office does before they close a file.
And I think in that instance, I think there would just be a vote to stay the issue until the Wayne County investigation is closed.
I'm fine leaving it. I know we discussed it, so I just, want to bring it up. So we can leave it the way it is. I'm okay to move.
From the chair, let me just ask this
Mhm.
question. So if there's a complaint and it's criminal in nature, but also contains ethical violations, are you saying the board can proceed simultaneously with the ethics portion as well as refer the criminal matters over to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office? Is that what you're saying? Or does the whole thing have to go to Wayne County Prosecutor's Office for them, and then we stay it until we find out what happens on their end, and then we proceed on the ethical violations?
I think as it stands currently, we would have the option to do both. It was a situation where we would need to stay the information or stay the ethics board investigation until we receive further information from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. It can be conducted in that way, or the board can vote to continue its investigation in regards to the matters that pertain to the ethics board while the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office deals with the criminal investigation, if there's any to occur.
Well, I have a suggestion on that point. Let's take out the part where we can only request update reports on an annual basis. Really, I'm trying to be sensitive to what you're suggesting and take everything into consideration. I don't remember what the discussion was. I think that what we wanted to do is we wanted to make it clear that the board could request updates from the prosecutors. Are you going to do anything on this, or are you letting this go? So I would say that based upon Ms. Amoud's inquiry that what we should do would be to delete the words on an annual basis. I don't think we would want to be limited to that. A year is a long time to wait.
Or
Maybe
say
in
when
some
available.
circumstances it's not. Maybe in some circumstances it is. How would
And that
everybody
was
feel?
the challenge in the past, is like, if we don't get a response, we're keeping it open.
Right.
And
would-
we have to do by December 15th, our report, and we have to keep all these cases open because they were referred.
Well, Mr. Pinkins, I guess the question would be, the subcommittee suggested a change, but I think what I'm hearing today, we want to suggest the board, the full board, as a result of Ms. Amoud's comments, we want to suggest deleting the words on an annual basis. Then we have the right to request an update at any time, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe a year would be right.
Okay.
And it could be before we issue our annual report, and it could be on an annual basis, but this way we can,
Yeah.
for other cases, if we can solve them and close them before, why not?
Also, we don't want the complainant to sort of be left in limbo as to what's going on with their complaint, was at the prosecutor's office or not. So, okay. So for the record, since the subcommittee is recommending a change to its change, what would be the wording that you would like added so we can put that in the record now?
Well, I'm just going by what I suggested, was just deleting the words on an annual basis, putting a period after the words referrals.
So on page 24, under subcategory 3, it says, if the allegations contained in the complaint appear to be criminal in nature, the ethics board shall immediately forward a complaint and all documentation that has received relating to the complaint to the Office of the Wayne County Prosecutor or any other appropriate law enforcement authority. No further action shall be taken by the board. In the event of a criminal referral, all deadlines for the board to respond are stayed until a response is received from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. The board may request a status report on all referrals. Is that the language?
Well, I have to point out something. We added language stating that the board should be able to make referrals to other agencies besides the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, for example, the Detroit Police. So we added that language. So I really believe now that the third line up from the bottom, we should take out the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and we should put in the law enforcement authority that it was referred to. I honestly did not
I'm
see that.
fine with that, yeah.
I did not see that before. Do you see what I'm referencing now, Mr. Longstreet? We changed the subcommittee, changed it so we changed the wording to take out just the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. We put Wayne County Prosecutor or any other appropriate law enforcement authority. But that's what we suggested to be added. For example, the perfect situation would be the Detroit Police. We want to make a referral to them. Then I would say that the third line from the bottom, we need to take out Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and put from the law enforcement agency to which the referral was made. Because if we referred something to the Detroit Police, it may not make sense to start contacting the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I don't know how everybody would feel about that, but I think that we do need to be consistent.
Thank you. As the appointee from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, I just like that it's clean, that everything will be referred to them. We're Wayne County Board of Ethics, not so much designated to a specific city. So I'm not in favor of the change of that adds any other appropriate law enforcement agency. I like it that it says Wayne County Prosecutor and would not advocate for the change in the lines below as well.
I think the original framers, when they drafted this document, I think they were considering just that Wayne County Prosecutor is the prosecutor for Wayne County. And because this is the Wayne County Ethics Board, I do believe that's what their intention was. So the chair would agree to add any other appropriate law enforcement. But the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office possibly should remain. Because at that point, then there's a number of departments, law enforcement departments across Wayne County that we have to begin to interact with and have some sort of communications with. So going through the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or on specific occasions, possibly another law enforcement department may be needed, but I do think that language should remain. Mr. Longstreet.
If I may, the suggestion to add any other law enforcement agency was actually my idea. And the reason for that idea is because I wanted the option to go to the AUSA's office as I wanted to their public corruption department if I thought the allegations were serious enough. I may want to go a little stronger than the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, depends on what it is. So that was my suggestion, and it was only to strengthen the power of this board by having the option to, hey, I think we might need to go to the Department of Justice on this one versus the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. That was the reason I made the suggestion.
Well, just so that I'm clear, is there a problem if you go into paragraph 3, the language that was added, the underlined language in the first instance, is that acceptable to everybody? The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other law enforcement authority? Is that acceptable or is that a problem? Because if that's acceptable, I think that something needs to be done to the third line up where it says that we only have the right to request status reports from the prosecutor's office. I think that was an oversight on our part. That's fine. You're suggesting something that I alluded to. The third line up, we have to modify where it says that we can request update reports from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. The language that you're saying has to be added is or any other law enforcement agency that the referral was made to. And I agree with that 100%.
But from the chair, I would say that the last line sort of covers those bases. When you say the board may request a status report on all referrals. So if it's been referred to any agency, wouldn't that be a referral that we can request a status report on? So I think that sort of covers it. I think right above that, when we say until a response is received from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, we're sort of limiting that until we get a response from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. But if we referred it to another law enforcement office, then we wouldn't be waiting for a response from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Do we have to wait for a response from that particular law enforcement that it was referred to? We have to wait for a response from them as well.
Through the chair.
Yes, Ms. Dr. Carnell, excuse me.
I am opposed to any language that gives us the authority to refer a complaint, criminal in nature, to any other law enforcement agency other than the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
How does everyone else feel about that?
I think it's a stretch in our authority. We're talking about Wayne County ethics. Anything criminal in nature would go to the Wayne County Prosecutor. Cut and dry for me, pretty simple.
Doctor, what I would just like to point out, sitting here listening to this, I guess my problem would be with that. And the reason we spent time making changes to this, and I agree with the changes right now that have been suggested by Mr. Schaefer and by the chair regarding the period after referrals. I agree with that. But I guess that my concern would be, what if there was a complaint received regarding somebody at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, an assistant prosecutor? Would we want to make a referral to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, or would we feel that it would be more appropriate to refer the matter to the Detroit Police or the federal authorities? So I think that was the reason why we were sold on the idea. I just think that it was a sound change to make, and I don't know the policy reason that we would want to stick to only referring matters to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I don't know. I don't understand.
My thinking is it is the Wayne County, we serve on behalf of Wayne County. And that if there's something criminal in nature, it goes to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. It doesn't go to local police, because we're not a local ethics board. We are a Wayne County ethics board.
Mr. Longstreet.
I think it's a stretch in our authority to say where criminal complaints should go when we have a county entity that handles criminal complaints.
Just have a question. Say there's an instance where there's a misappropriation of funds at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. They receive a complaint about it. Do we then refer it back to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office saying, well, we have a complaint here that claims malfeasance against your office and a particular person? Do we send it to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and to prosecute their own people? Or do we send this to the Department of Justice, the Public Corruption Department, and say there is an issue of malfeasance with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office? Perhaps the Department of Justice should take a look at this issue and report back to the Wayne County Ethics Board in regards to what you believe we should do about this issue involving our law enforcement department. So I just thought it was just sound judgment to not just limit our authority to just Wayne County and give ourselves a little bit more strength in regards to how we handle things, and also give us some options to choose the law enforcement agency that we think is most appropriate. I think it most certainly would come to the vote of the board to determine where the complaint should be sent to. So that would be voted upon by the board, whether this board should decide to send it to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or the Department of Justice. But I think the Department of Justice is a pretty strong hammer to send some information to, not just, I'd rather have two than one.
Just from the chair, that was a concern that I have always had, that if we have a complaint come in as criminal in nature against someone in the prosecutor's office, then do we send it to the prosecutor's office because it's criminal in nature, but it alleges against someone in the prosecutor's office? And if it violates the ethics code, then do we also, it goes to the prosecutor's office to basically investigate itself? And then what if we get a response back, and the response is from the person who the complaint is against, saying, yes, we received this complaint and we're gonna keep you updated as to the process that we're gonna take? What
My
happens then?
response to that is,
Dr. Carnell?
yes, when a complaint comes against someone at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, at that point, we can make a determination that the complaint goes there, but it also can go somewhere else. We have that authority to do that. But I don't like it in writing here that we have to then think about which other agency are we going to send other complaints that are not that is not a complaint against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. As it stands with the changes, every time a complaint that is criminal in nature, no matter where it is going, whether it is for the or against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other office, we're going to sit and determine what other law enforcement agency it should go to. And I don't think that's the case. If it's a complaint against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, then the Ethics Board may determine that it will go there and somewhere else. That language, without adding the words "and any other appropriate law enforcement," does not preclude the Ethics Board from sending it to the Justice Department.
But if it says that we're to send any complaint in criminal in nature to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, then that's the law, right? That's what we must do.
But it does
doesn't
not
say that we can send it to any other department that we deem necessary outside the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office if it's criminal in nature. It doesn't give us that leeway to do that. I mean, in the statute itself, it doesn't give us the leeway. What you're saying makes sense, Dr. Carnell, but what I'm saying is that it's not stated in the law. And if it's not stated there, can we do it?
Doesn't prohibit you from doing it.
I think
Yes,
prior
Mr.
to the,
Longstreet.
I'm sorry,
Yes, go. Mr. Longstreet, go.
prior to the change, the only option this board had was to send referrals to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. When I particularly saw that, I thought to myself, what if somebody stole some money at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office that belonged to the county? Would I send that to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, say, hey, your person's stealing, are you gonna prosecute them? No, I would want to send that to the U.S. Attorney's Office, say, hey, somebody's stealing at the prosecutor's office, you might want to take care of this. So I think prior to this change, the only option that this board had was to either send it to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or deal with it themselves. With the added change, it gives this board the option to choose or vote either Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or the Department of Justice Public Corruption Division. We have the option. Prior to this change, you didn't have the option at all.
Yes, Ms. Hammoud, I think you've been waiting.
I want to make sure Dr. Cornell finished.
So initially, when we talked about this, we said the Ethics Board wanted the opportunity to send it to, let's say, the Detroit Police. It was a little bit of any criminal complaint can go to any other appropriate law enforcement. Now I'm hearing that if a complaint is on the Wayne County or is in reference to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, then we want the latitude to send information somewhere else. If the committee or the board wants to change it to specifically address complaints that are criminal in nature involving the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, to then be able to send information or documentation to another law enforcement agency, I may be amenable to that, but not as it stands like this.
Chair?
Yes, Ms. Hammoud.
Here in the discussion, maybe I can recommend then to be able to keep at least from a process of handling, the complaints. I agree with Dr. Carnell. We should have one place where we're sending those. So this way there's no confusion. So we can keep that like all, complaints. Here it says, I think, shall immediately forward the complaint and all documentation it has received relating to the complaint to the office of Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And then we can put in the exception, maybe like another bullet point, if that complaint is against someone in the prosecutor's office, we will send them the complaint to the prosecutor office, and we can pick the next authority, whether Attorney General, whether the corruption unit at the federal bureau, but this way, at least future board members, they know where to go, rather than having discussion where to even send it. So this way, it's in there. All criminal nature complaints go into the Wayne County prosecutor. If the Wayne County prosecutor's office is involved, then you send it and then tell them where to send it. So it's not open and you want to have a discussion where to send it. Just a suggestion.
Are you finished, Ms. Mahmood?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Cornell.
I also don't see this as being different than a couple of cases that we heard last year, it might have been 2 years ago with Treasurer's Office. We asked the treasurer to come in and we had a complaint, and it was a complaint about the treasurer's office. And we had to, we asked the treasurer to take care of it. I don't see the difference in this type of language or adding, I don't see the purpose of adding this type of language. We go to entities all the time and ask the head of that particular entity to take care of it. But when it comes to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, we're saying, no, we don't want you to take care of it if it involves someone in your own agency.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
No. I think when we talked about the situation where the complaint is against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, I'm really not certain that that's the only time that a referral should be referred to a different agency. What if there was a complaint that was filed against a police department in Wayne County, and we felt that it should be sent to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and or the U.S. Attorney's Office because the allegations are so serious. I don't want to speculate or hypothecate on what they could be. But I think that if you put in the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office as the starting point, and as that being the point, I think you're actually limiting the authority of future boards when we're not here any longer, when other people are here serving on terms. So I like the option. And I think that the language suggested by Mr. Fisher regarding the requesting a report, I think that would clarify it. But I would just say that I feel that the board should be able to make a referral to an appropriate law enforcement agency, maybe in conjunction with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, maybe not the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, because of potential conflicts that we might perceive. That's where I'm at on it.
Schaefer, and then Ms. Hamud, then if Ms. Hamud wants to go again, then we're gonna move on. Schaefer.
Oh, thank you. The way it's written just gives us the option, and we're not having our hands tied that we have to go to the, I mean, in reality, most of these issues, if they're going to go to a criminal investigation, will go to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I just don't, I think it's wise to have the commission as an independent body being able to make the referral that the commission would decide after their own investigation and not be tied to one referral source. So we're independent. The reality is most of these would go to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, but we should leave the board with the option to take it someplace else. And it really will be decided on a case-by-case basis. That's how I view it.
favor of limited to Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and or Department of Justice, Corruption Division? Or would appropriate to say Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other appropriate law enforcement authority?
I like the language with the or to any other, and then the board can vote on it at that time, and our hands are not tied to go to the Department of Justice, or that we may say, well, really, this needs to go to the county treasurer's office, as Dr. Carnell indicated on something last year, 2 years ago. So I think we should give the board and the future boards the option to make that decision rather than locking them up to those two entities. And I think it's really what Mr. Longstreet, when he drafted this, I think that, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that was part of the discussion that was had. And I'm guessing that was kind of his thought is, let's have the options open to the board. The board would make the decision. It's going to be a voted on issue by the board on each specific case. So I like the way it's written.
Why don't we do this at this time, because we have to move on. So at this time, the chair would adopt language that's acceptable to the board, and we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Longstreet or Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Thomas, since you are chair of the subcommittee, it's a recommendation that your subcommittee put forward. If you are agreeable to the language being changed, then you tell us the language that you would like to see in it, and then we'll take a vote.
Well, I will tell you, I'm satisfied with the language as it exists. I do, in light of the discussion here today, I do believe that a change needs to be made to the third line from the bottom, where it says that a response could be requested. We have to add language that it's not just from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, but the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other agency that a referral was made to. So that if we refer it to somebody other than the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, we can request an update from them. So that's what I think needs to be done. Then the very last sentence, it's underlined. The board may request a status report on all referrals. The point that I raised 20 minutes ago or a half hour ago was, I think we should now put a period after referral so that we don't have to wait a year to request a change. So the first change, the underlying change, I'm making a motion that it be adopted. I'm also making a motion that the change be made that Mr. Schaefer suggested to say that the matters are stayed until a response is received from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other law enforcement agency that the matter was referred to, and then deleting the last 4 words of the last sentence.
All right, so is someone here able to adopt the language or at least read the language that we're going to vote on? Because I want to make sure that everyone understands what they're voting on, what language that's going to be adopted. So if we can put forth the language at this time.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, can you read it?
Okay.
Yes, 1 second.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Carnell.
So the rationale for putting in the words any other appropriate law enforcement was related to complaints against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. That was the rationale that I heard, correct?
I will tell you, speaking for myself, that was not my rationale. What if we got a complaint against the Wayne County Sheriff's Department and we thought that a referral should be made to the prosecutor's office and the federal authorities or the state police? So that was just an example that I came up with here today.
Okay, that's what you said, Mr. Thomas, but that's not what I heard from Mr. Longstreet. So I'm just trying to get clarification.
Oh, I don't have a problem with clarification. I was just making a example in regards to what I would believe would prompt myself to say, this might need to go to the Department of Justice. But I wouldn't limit it to, I'd rather fight with 2 fists than 1. So I'd rather not have one hand behind my back. So with that being said, I think this board should be able to choose, okay, we got a complaint against the Sheriff's Department. This is very egregious in nature. I think we should, maybe we should look into a federal probe being launched in this particular issue. Let's contact the Department of Justice, see what we can get done on this. That may be a situation. Or it may not be that serious and we need to send it to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Or we send it to both. We can all work in conjunction. But what I'm saying is, I don't like to fight with one hand behind my back. I'd rather have two.
Okay,
That
Mr.
preclu-
Thomas.
And that assumption is that the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office wouldn't do that. They wouldn't forward it on to another law enforcement agency.
They may.
That's my point.
Respectfully, I would think that they may do that. However, I think it's most appropriate this board be able to vote and choose.
Ms. Hamud, then we're going to go back to Mr. Thomas to read into the record. Yes, Ms. Hamud.
Oh, okay. Do
Are
you
you
want
done?
to
Excuse me,
have
are
them
you
read
done, Dr.
the
Cornell?
motion first and then we continue the discussion then?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, excuse me. You can read for the record, Mr. Thomas, the language.
Paragraph 3, if the allegations contained in the complaint appear to be criminal in nature, the Ethics Board shall immediately forward the complaint and all documentation it has received relating to the complaint to the Office of the Wayne County Prosecutor or any other appropriate law enforcement authority, and no further action shall be taken by the board. In the event of a criminal referral, all deadlines for the board to respond are stayed until a response is received from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office or any other law enforcement agency that the matter was referred to. The board may request a status report on all referrals, period.
Okay, now at this time, we'll take a motion to adopt the language that was just read into the record with respect to this section of the ethics ordinance. Is there a motion to adopt the language? Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
We
opposed
have a
indicate.
discussion, I'm sorry.
Well, discussion, Mr. Schaefer made Mr. Schaefer made the motion. So Mr. Schaefer, start off with this discussion. Do you want the discussion, Mr. Schaefer?
I thought we discussed this pretty thoroughly, but if you wish to discuss it further, go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Hamud.
Yes, I like to, again, from a process standpoint, I believe that the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office should receive all the criminal nature complaints. So if we want to adopt a language, I mean, this is when, to your point earlier, like we should have the and at least. Because in my mind, yes, we are in Wayne County. If we have anything that we think has any criminal nature, that should be referred to Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Now, to not tie the hands of the board members, I agree that the board may feel that also, in addition to Wayne County prosecutors, they can also send it somewhere else. And that's why, like I had suggested to say, okay, you send it to, like this is the process, should be sending it to Wayne County. But if the board feels that the Wayne County may have conflict or some concern, then, or bias, then the board will be able or like have the authority to refer it, to another, whether Attorney General, other law enforcement. So just my thought.
Further discussion? Yes, Dr. Cornell.
I don't see how you're going to cut out the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Yeah.
You're cutting out
With the or.
an entity.
I don't think it's being cut out. I think they're adding other law enforcement authority. I think Wayne County Prosecutor, as the language that was read, is still there.
It has
It's
an
just said-
or.
It says Wayne County Prosecutor or any other. So it's given the option to do one or the other if the board deems necessary. It just gives the board a little more room to operate as opposed to, because if you say just Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, it seems as though it must go to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and that's it. There's nothing in there. If you don't have that in there, there's nothing in there to say it can go somewhere else. And I think, as was mentioned, for future boards will look at this and say, Well, this is the document that we must follow. This is the law. And if it doesn't say it in the law, it cannot be done. We can't assume something where it's not written. We can't just assume that we could send it somewhere else. If it's written that it goes to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, that it must go there. I don't think you can interpret and assume into the language that's not written there specifically. And that's what I think this board is trying to do today, to actually make it so this board understands what it can and cannot do. Dr. Carnell.
Is or Wayne County Prosecutor, or, it doesn't say and, it says or, which means I can cut out the Wayne County Prosecutor.
Ms. Hammoud and then Mr. Schaefer.
Yeah,
Ms.
I mean,
Hammoud, you're
I
waiting.
read it the way, I mean, Ms. Karna, I know this may not be the intention, but the way I would read this, that if the board send it, let's say to the Attorney General, not even to the Justice Department, they don't have to send it to the prosecutor's office. The way it's written, it says relating to the complaint to the Office of Wayne County Prosecutors or other law enforcement. So if they send it to the Detroit Police, they don't have to send it to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I like the fact to keep it that all criminal nature complaints go to the prosecutor's office. And if we want to also send it somewhere else, then they can do that. But I don't want somebody to circumvent Wayne County and go somewhere else without having reported to Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Mr. Schaefer.
The reason we put or in there is so we give this board and the future boards the option of making that decision. This board, the Wayne County Ethics Commission, is an independent board. We should not be handcuffed or tied that we have to go to another elected office in the county and we don't have discretion to go someplace else. All this is doing is giving us discretion and an option to proceed as this board or future boards deem fit on a case-by-case scenario. I think it's important to give the board the option to make that decision on each case. Otherwise, if you have it in the conjunctive, if you have and, rather than in the disjunctive of or, you're tying them up. And they may say in some future case, it should not go to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office for whatever reason. I'm not saying that they won't. And the reality is, the practical reality is almost all of them will go to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. So that's my thought.
I think we have a motion out. The motion's been seconded. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion to adopt the language with respect to page 24 in the ethics ordinance under subsection 3 as was read, indicate yes, Ms. Spivey. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let's do a roll call vote if you want to do that. If there's a request for a roll call vote, let's do a roll call vote, but indicate by saying aye, those who are in favor. We're going to do a roll call vote. Ms. Spivey, can you conduct the vote for us, please?
Mr. Schaefer? Ms. Hammoud?
No.
Dr. Carnell?
No.
Vice Chair Thomas? Chair Pinkins?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So moved. Thank you, Ms. Spivey. Moving on to the rest of the recommendations to the ethics ordinance. I do believe, Ms. Hammoud, you were addressing concerns you had, and after we finish with you, then we'll go to any other members that concern.
I have one last item, just
Yes.
actually clarifying questions. Just under that section that we just discussed, item number 4. Can you, like, I know that there's some changes. It says the extent required by law, the identity, it's probably like we still have to keep the 2. To the extent required by law, the identity of the complainant shall be kept confidential. It's just maybe typo. I don't know if you have it correct, but mine, like the 2 is,
Right, Mr. Longstreet, we took the 2 out.
yeah, so you may want to
2 out,
keep the
yeah.
2. And on the same related subject here, because we, we're thinking with the required law, whether somebody may do a FOIA, and we have open meeting acts that we have to, be concerned with. So we will keep it confidential unless the law require otherwise. So on the same thing here, I think in section, and I'm gonna go to that section. Where it talks about advisory opinion. And I think we should add the same language, like to the extent required by law, there as well, since we're making that. I just go into that section, so give me a second.
Which paragraph are you on, Ms. Amu? Which
Um,
numbered paragraph?
Advisory opinion, which is, I'm just going there. Advisory opinion, it's on page 30th.
You're up to page 30?
Yes,
Okay.
I told you it's the last item, so get in there. And it's, when it says a request for an advisory opinion may be made anonymously. We just had a situation where somebody FOIA us and we had to give them the information. So maybe we want to add in that section, like to the extent required by law as well. Just,
I still don't see the spot that you're referring, you said
it's
page 30.
30th under advisory opinions.
Okay, I do see that now.
And it, in item number 1, I know it's messed up in my screen as well because,
And after anonymously?
yes. Yes, just to be clear and transparent with whoever asking that, yes, we will keep it confidential, but if somebody required us by FOIA or other like laws, we have to provide that information, so they may not remain. There's a chance that may not.
That's a good modification, so I would agree with that.
I'd go along with that.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you. Chair.
All right, anyone else has any other comments regarding the ethics ordinance, the recommendations from the subcommittee? Yes, Dr. Cornell. Have the floor.
Page 22, disqualification of a board member. Want to understand the rationale for the additional language.
Well,
Mr. Thomas, you have the floor, Mr. Thomas.
Rationale was, there's no procedure for this now. There's no rules, there's no guidance. So technically, if an individual filed a complaint with the board and they're complaining about somebody that is connected in some way, shape, or form to a board member, let's say that a board member is an attorney and then the attorney has represented the individual that's being complained of before. There's no real mechanism for that. And a couple years ago, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, there was a case where a board member who was actually a former Wayne County Circuit Court judge was wondering whether he had an obligation to disqualify himself. And I was actually involved in that case. And there was no guidance for him. There really was not. And he had to decide the matter essentially on his own. And what was very curious about that situation is that neither party in the case ever even raised the issue of disqualification. So I think that I personally felt very strongly that there should be some mechanism for a person who files a complaint or the respondent who has to defend against a complaint to be able to make a motion to disqualify a board member. It's fair. It applies in all court cases pursuant to court rule. We don't have anything like that right now, and I thought it was important to have that. And when I came up with that language, I really modeled that language from the court rule, the general court rules, concerning the disqualification of a judge. So if somebody was to say, well, absent this rule, could somebody still make a motion to disqualify a board member if they felt that the board member should be disqualified because they know the respondent or know the complainant? well, may, I don't know what the response would be. There's nothing in our rules concerning that. So I think that when the committee, the subcommittee met, and we met several times, I think one of the things we talked about was that for future members and even for current members, it would be good to give guidance to the public, to respondents, to complainants, that if they have a problem with the board member sitting on their matter, they can move to disqualify him, and we tried to come up with a procedure for doing so. So I guess that the rationale, Dr. Carnell, was that there's really not a mechanism right now. If somebody wanted to make a motion, where's the authority for it? Unless a board member raised it on his or her own, and they're going to decide it on his or her own, there's really no mechanism for moving to disqualify anybody.
Ask this question, how would it, that language is adopted, how would the motions be made by the party? Would there be particular forms provided for them to make that motion, particularly in many cases where you have parties who are often laymen? Would they know how to make this motion, or would that be explained to them how to make the motion? We did have a case somewhat similar where a party mistakenly did make that against another member, just because I think that member had the same name as last name as the person who which they wanted to bring their complaint against. It was found that obviously that member was not related to that person, but if that person wanted to file a motion, how would they go about doing it? Would that be explained to them at some point?
Well, I don't think that the proposal that we have in front of us addresses that. But what it does state is that it has to be in writing and state with some degree of specificity regarding what the allegations are, why the person should be disqualified. So if there's a suggestion that at some juncture when a complaint is received, that be added on a sheet in the back of the complaint form or something like that, I think we could do that ministerially. But I think what the subcommittee was concerned about is how mechanically this would be done. And I guess everybody has to decide whether this meets the mark.
Any other questions regarding this matter for Mr. Thomas? Dr. Cornell.
Member of the ethics board, the committee felt that each board member wouldn't recuse themselves from a hearing or a decision that may affect or where they have close contact. So it appears that the committee believed that the board members were not ethical. And it just seems to take away of our duty. And so by adding a process where someone else can say, I disqualify you because you're an attorney, and I've had hard times with attorneys before, so I don't want any attorney on the board to hear my case. It just seems to be another layer of paperwork that we'll have to start defending now. The chair has to decide whether or not that person needs to be disqualified based on a request from somebody who may not like the way somebody looks or may have the last name.
Just sort of piggyback on what Dr. Cornell has mentioned, then also the burden will be on the particular board member to provide a response within 7 days to the motion that was filed. So then that will put a burden on the member that the allegation was leveled against to provide a written response to the motion to disqualify.
Really how it's done in all court cases in Michigan. In administrative proceedings, an individual has the right to move to disqualify the judge, the administrative law judge. And the judge in the first instance, I think that standard also, the judge in the first instance does make the decision as to whether he or she should be disqualified.
Yes, Dr. Cornell, and then Mr. Schaefer.
I'm not sure that this body is seen as the same as a court.
Body is somewhat unofficial. We do operate in a, while we do follow certain rules of evidence and that, we do sort of act unofficially and sort of, we don't necessarily follow all of the rules that a court will follow. So this board is somewhat unofficial in nature as to our proceedings, although we do follow Robert's Rules of Order. But we don't necessarily adhere to all the rules of evidence and things of that nature. So I think that's what she's alluding to. Mr. Schaefer.
Agree with Mr. Thomas that all this language does is provide a process. Should that unlikely event occur where somebody seeks to disqualify a board member, all it does is give us a blueprint about how to proceed. Without this, there was no underlying blueprint. So this is the steps that would take place. And been practicing law for 46 years, and it's extraordinarily rare where a judge is asked to be recused for any kind of ethics issue. So we're talking about, I think, very rare situations that are going to come up, and this just gives a guidance for the future boards as to what to do. Here's how you handle it. So I
Any other? Yes, Dr. Cornell.
If the process for disqualifying a board member is in the packet that we give individuals when they want to file a complaint, it becomes a standard procedure.
Chair is going to have to agree because if we're putting this out into the general public with respect to court matters, people generally understand. Obviously, they work through their attorneys. Their attorneys are court officers and understand how the process works. You don't have an individual generally, unless they're operating pro se, but you generally don't have individuals coming in themselves, moving to disqualify a judge. Usually that's done through their attorneys. In this case, you would have individual people, lay persons, filing motions to disqualify for whatever reason. As was mentioned, possibly they don't like a person. Possibly they feel a person has the same last name as someone they filed a complaint against. Possibly they just, had some bad interactions with a person that's on this board. It does sort of open the door for a lot of other problems to come about when you're dealing particularly with people who are not attorneys. Because again, I do believe attorneys understand the rules and the formalities, and things generally flow, not oftentimes. We know we're attorneys. They don't oftentimes flow the way they should in the courtroom proceedings, but they generally do because attorneys know what can and cannot be brought, and we can be sanctioned if we bring frivolous motions. So we know what we can and cannot do, whereas the general public may not. And they bring certain idiosyncrasies to the table, and this may just open a door for a lot of other issues to come about. So with that said, if the members would like to put a vote to this matter, to this language, the chair is open to entertaining a motion. Dr. Cornell, I believe.
I'd like to move that the section 8 of, I think it's 40.7 be removed.
Okay, there's a motion before the board. Is that motion seconded?
Section 40.7 has subsection, 10 subsections. Are you referring only to subsection 8?
That's what I said, yes, section 8. Yes.
And just for clarification as well, let the chair read the call of the motion. So the motion is to remove section, I believe it's 40-7, subsection 8 of the recommendation for the ethics ordinance, amendments to the ethics ordinance. There's a motion before the floor to remove section 40-7, subsection 8 from the recommendation to the amendments to the ethics ordinance. Is there a second? Okay, no second. Chair is going to second the motion. This time, we're going to put this motion before a vote unless the person who made the motion, Dr. Cornell, wishes further discussion on the motion. Dr. Cornell, would you like any further discussion on the motion?
The reason why I'd like to, or I'm recommending that it's removed is it's another layer of procedure. I don't think it's necessary. We haven't had any cases where only one, where we have had a discussion about a board member, whether or not they felt that they should be a part of the complaint. I don't think we should put in rules or regulations based on one instance. We're not a court, and I just think this is more than what we need at this time.
Any other discussion on the motion? No further discussion. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion as placed forward, indicate by saying aye.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Spivey, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Schaefer? Ms. Hamud?
No.
Dr. Carnell?
Yes.
Vice Chair Thomas? Chair Pinkins?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion has failed. So moved. Any further discussion, Dr. Thomas, on any of the recommendations before the ethics ordinance? The recommendations, yes, Dr. Cornell.
One more. And it's on the investigation piece. Funding, where is the funding? Where does the committee see the funding come from? When we talked about this in the past, there was the part of,
Dr. Cornell, what page are you on there?
thank you, 26. Talked about this last time. There were discussions around funding. Where are we going to get the money for someone to do the investigations? Is that part of Mr. Longstreet's contract? Or any other pieces associated with providing subpoenas or investigations in general, outside of what happens in the hearings during the ethics committee board meeting?
That's Mr. Thomas, you can respond.
Dr. Carnell, I'm not sure about what you're on paragraph D on page 26. Well, I'm not certain that I understand the issue that you're raising.
Let me back up a little bit. Help me understand why we have this additional language in here.
That I do, and thank you. Well, I would say this, from the way the rules operate right now, the burden is very clearly on a complainant to come forward and investigate their complaint and provide evidence to us. That's initially. Moving on from that, if the board makes a determination that there's going to be a hearing or that evidence is needed so that the board could make a determination as to what to do with the complaint, records are needed. There is really no way of obtaining that evidence, that information, absent requesting it from the respondent. I mean, you go to the respondent, you request a respondent. Well, you work in this office, this was done, that was done. And I think that my feeling has always been that the board should be able to make a determination and inform their attorney, Mr. Longstreet, of what might be needed. Or maybe Mr. Longstreet might make a determination that certain evidence or records would be relevant to him in formulating his opinion as to how he should advise us. If you take a look at the rules as they exist now, we don't have any compulsory process for obtaining this information, and we don't have any funding for the obtaining of it. If we went to a department, let's say, that's not in Wayne County, or maybe that is in Wayne County, right? It's a private company, and we wanted to request records. That's a request. That's, you send a letter and you request it. You may get a response, you may not get a response. And there's issues regarding copying costs and things along those lines. And while this may not have been a compelling problem in the past, I think it certainly could be. And that was why I always wanted to get a budget for this. And I will tell you very candidly, Mr. Longstreet informed the subcommittee when we were meeting, he has no idea what he could do for funding to obtain a private investigator. It doesn't exist. So he can't go and hire a private investigator. So that was the feeling at the time. And that ties in with subparagraph E regarding subpoena authority. So they're tied in together, and that's the best case scenario that I could possibly come up with today for why we need it. The board is entitled, and future boards, not just us, future boards are entitled to have the evidence and the records and the testimony that they feel they need in order to make a fair decision on a matter.
Dr. Carnell, then Mr. Longstreet, I'll let you.
I understand the need. My original concern was the cost, which you mentioned. We don't have the budget for it. So I'm not sure how we put in something that we don't have the money for. And so is the notion that we put in something and then ask for the money, or we put in, I'm not sure how that's going to work. We have something in our rules and regulations that we're going to do, but we don't have the funding to do it. So are we, when we can't do it, what does that say that we're not adhering to the ordinance?
Thomas or Mr. Longstreet?
Well, it would have to come from the county. It would have to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. And we have a provision in here that the county is responsible. We address it under a separate section for cost out-of-pocket expenses for even board members. We would have to do that. And I will tell you, we discussed that. We actually discussed that. But what I would say is this: I think it's enough to say we all agree, if we do agree, that this is necessary. And then we worry about getting funding from the county. I don't know that would have to go into the ethics code. The is responsible for securing this room for our meetings. They're responsible for, I think the only expense we have covered is parking. I think we do have that covered. But I think this kind of expands it a bit, and it would have to be the county because we don't have a budget.
Let me just ask this question just through the chair, from the chair rather. From the procurement contracts, my understanding for legal representation, particularly for our counsel for the boards, is there a provision for paralegals and legal assistants within your office, Mr. Longstreet?
I was going to address that in regards to Dr. Carnero's inquiry in regards to whether my contract covers that. It does not cover investigators, and that was one of my major concerns, is because it didn't cover investigators. Because I would rather have an investigator than a paralegal, to be honest with you. However, my contract does not include investigators, but it does include me allowing me to hire paralegals to assist me in any action I take on behalf of this board. But it doesn't include investigators, but I think it could just be easy as adding the amendment and hire the investigator as I need to, if that's what the board wants to be done, that it wouldn't be necessarily a budgetary issue. It would just be added to my contract. Mr. Longstreet, you're responsible for taking care of the investigator. Okay, not a problem. You could do it that way. But I don't know if there's any budget for that, and there hasn't been no issue in regards to, there's nothing in my contract currently that says I can hire an investigator. No.
There's a specific amount for paralegals.
$75 an hour.
That's Dr. Cornell.
And Mr. Longstreet, does your contracts mention paralegals, or do you have latitude to hire investigators? Or is that what you're asking the board to do at a later time, to amend your contract to include investigators?
My contract is silent on investigator. It does say paralegal. Says lawyers and paralegals. It does not indicate investigator. It could, and I have investigators that I can hire. That's not an issue. It just doesn't include me at this time or allot me anything to hire an investigator to be reimbursed. No.
I have an additional question to that, if I may.
Yes, Dr. Cornell.
So do you have, this is a tricky question. Does your do you feel that within the line item budgeted for your contract that you are able, if your contract is amended, to hire investigators without additional funding?
I think additional funding will be required.
And that's a little bit to my point of how do we have something in the ordinance that we can't fund?
So are you saying that if you were to hire a paralegal, that also comes out the funding that's set up for your office
I
currently?
believe so, yes.
And if the funding, once the funding runs out, my understanding is this board
Has
requests
to
from
renew
the,
it, yes.
yes, request from the commission to add additional funds. So if you hired a paralegal and together with your services, if that exhausted funds that are currently available, then this board would have to request from the commission additional funds. So it'd be the same. I would assume it would be the same if you had a investigator.
I believe so. The way I read the contract is there's a pool of funds for which I draw from. And that pool of funds is for my direct services and the services of any paralegal that I hire. And I bill for those, but any job that I do myself, anything I hire a paralegal to do, and it comes out of one pool of money. I would imagine that same pool could be used to hire an investigator if necessary. And it would just be the same pool of money. It would just be another person feeding off of it. That's all. No big deal.
Your estimation, how much does the investigators normally run, or how much time is generally allotted for an investigator's work?
In my line of work, typically an investigator is anywhere between $50 and $100 an hour, depending upon who you use. The number of hours they typically work depends upon the case. Most of my cases where I hire an investigator, they're doing 50 to 100 hours or more, but those are generally larger conspiracy federal investigations, not necessarily anything that has to do with the board. So I don't know how much time would be allotted for an investigator in regards to a ethics investigation.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Dr. Cornell.
This question is to Mr. Thomas. So this language inserted into the ordinance is a recommendation for the commission for consideration.
I'm not certain that I understand that. You're saying that it's a recommendation to the board before we include a request for funds? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking the changes that you made, particularly related to investigative authority, understanding that we don't have the funds to do so, would be a recommendation to the commission, the Wayne County Commissioners, for their consideration in adding money.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And there's one point I would like to raise, and Mr. Longstreet didn't raise it. Lawyers have a problem when it comes to having their own staff do investigative work, a paralegal. Questions arise whether challenges could be made to what the propriety of that individual even getting on the stand and testifying. If a lawyer interviews a witness and that witness gets on the stand and denies what they told the lawyer can't get up on the witness stand. They're precluded from doing so. They have become a witness in the case. I would just say this. I personally do use private investigators as the need arises. I have never had a paralegal substitute in as a private investigator. And then there's also geographics on it. Mr. Longstreet may want to hire an investigator from up in the Flint area to interview a couple witnesses who have moved up there. We're not going to send a paralegal up there. That ends up costing more money than hiring the local private investigator. So the recommendation is that if and when the need arises, I don't think that we can necessarily depend on respondents or complainants to always furnish the board with the evidence they need to make a determination regarding the complaint.
I do understand the need for the language. I'd have the capacity to search for, obtain the documents that they claimed they'd seen or information that they'd heard, or even investigate these matters. We had a matter before, I believe, the Wayne County Treasurers, where we had actually a couple matters where complainants had made a number of allegations, but they could not provide the documentation. We basically was asking the department themselves to turn over this documentation to us. And sometimes they're not always forthcoming, and the complainant has no access to these documents. They have no access to these departments. So I do understand the need for this. My question would be also, is this really a matter of the commission adding more funding for investigators, or would this just be a matter of going to the procurement office and recommending possibly a change to possibly paralegal / investigator to
Both
the
work.
contract?
I think both work.
There's no further questions or discussion on this matter. We'll move forward. Any other discussion on this matter here? Okay, Dr. Cornell, you had the floor regarding the recommendations before the ethics ordinance.
Thank you. I am done. Thank you.
Further discussions and further discussions on the recommendations to be made to the ethics ordinance from any board members at this time? If there's no further discussion, the chair has no discussion as well. I also, again, from the chair, want to extend my gratitude to Mr. Thomas. Outstanding job serving as chair of the subcommittee. Outstanding job with your report. Also to Mr. Schaefer and to Ms. Lewis. I know she isn't here today, but just want to state it for the record. Outstanding job in your work and diligently seeing this matter through and addressing the questions from all board members. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the recommendations as made from the subcommittee and the subcommittee's report. If there is a motion to adopt the recommendations that was made to the ethics ordinance, or to adopt the report as submitted by the subcommittee from Mr. Thomas, if there's a motion, the chair will accept that motion right now.
Well, I would make that motion, but my motion is to adopt the recommendations as clarified here today, because we've changed the wording around in several areas. So that's my motion. And Mr. Longstreet, I was very careful to read for him what the changes were. So I'm making a motion to adopt the proposed modified ethics code with the changes that we've discussed here on the record today. And I suppose that would be up to Mr. Longstreet to get that to the chair so that the chair could forward it to the appropriate office over at the Wayne County Commission.
Okay, so the call of the motion that's before this board right now is to adopt the proposed modified recommended amendments as discussed here today. The amendments that you have before you, the proposed modified recommended amendments, and those are stated on the record. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. All in favor of adopting the proposed? Yes, Ms. Dr. Cornell. We'll open it up for some discussion. Mr. Thomas, this is your motion. Would you like to lead the discussion off, sir, or would you?
No, I just want, my only concern was that my motion be clear to adopt the proposed recommendations as amended here today. And I think that as you said that, that is clear. So I have no further discussion. I'll answer questions.
Okay, Dr. Cornell, you have this, we open this up for discussion on the motion. Dr. Cornell, you have the floor.
Thank you. I will be voting no based on my viewpoints on a couple of the items. I do appreciate the work that Mr. Thomas and the committee did. I wish the other members of the committee were present. I also wish that we had a full board before we adopt the amendments to send forward. But I just wanted you to understand why I would be voting no.
Any other discussion on this matter? Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and put this matter before the vote. Does anyone want to request a roll call vote at this time?
Yes, please.
Ms. Spivey, are you prepared to do a roll call vote?
Mr. Schaefer? Ms. Hamud?
Yes.
Dr. Carnell?
No.
Vice Chair Thomas?
Yes, aye.
Chair Pinkins?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So moved. Thank you again for your work on this matter, Mr. Thomas. And at this time, the subcommittee is dissolved. Your report is accepted into the record. I think Ms. Johnson was here. Ms. Johnson, just a quick question from the chair, if you can. I know you explained this before, and I know it was reiterated to me some of the process. This process is, I understand the recommendations would come to your office, and from your office, if needed be, it would go with the chair would see it in some type of way. It may go before committee. At some point, did you mention that the chair of this board may be asked to come before the commission to discuss some of these recommendations at some point, or if that were to occur? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Through the chair to this honorable body, Felicia Johnson, attorney for the county commission. Yes, as you indicated, this item would be submitted to the Wayne County Commission, specifically directed to the chair of the commission. It would then go to commission staff for review like all other items. Because it's an ordinance, it will come to my office primarily for review. After that review, I will have a discussion with the chairwoman to determine how she wants to direct the item. It will at some point make it to a committee. Those committees are obviously open to the public. This board can be advised of that committee and is free to attend to make comments. I don't know at this point if there will be a direct request to have someone there, because again, it is an ordinance of the commission, but they may want someone there to explain some of the rationale behind some of the provisions. There's also a possibility that as we review the items, that there may be some informal discussions with this body before we actually take it to a committee of the commission. So it's a few ways that this could occur, as again, not exactly sure how that will play out at this point, but it ultimately will begin with review by my office.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any questions of Ms. Johnson at this time from any board member? Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, moving right along to our agenda for today. We're moving on to item, I believe this is D, new business under section 1. We have a FOIA request from Donald Kochanek. Apologize if I'm butchering the name.
If I may,
Response regarding communication about Mamata Burgee. Mr. Longstreet, yes.
there is a remaining issue of old business.
Oh, for business, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The chairman.
There is a remaining issue. I believe it was the August meeting in which there was a vote to determine whether letters drafted by complainants, whether those response letters that we send to the board should be sent to the complainant. I believe that Mr. Thomas entertained a motion to have all letters of complaints and or their responses sent to the complainant. That vote needs to still occur.
Doesn't matter.
And that was specifically to the Reverend John Taylor complaint.
Gonna deal with that matter. For some reason, I'm not sure if that made it to our agenda. Okay, but I do, the chair does remember that that was an issue that we had. I thought we voted on that, but yeah, there was another issue that we had not finalized everything with respect to the letters. Can you mention that again, Mr. Longstreet? Just because I know a lot of us don't have that on their agenda.
It's not on the agenda, but there is a matter of old business, and I think it's also in the meeting minutes. That issue was whether once the complainant the board has responded, and we send a letter to the sheriff's department. Should that letter be then sent to the complainant in regards to our response to his complaint? I believe that there was discussion. All the board agreed that yes, that letter should be sent to the complainant upon the board responding to their complaints. However, there was no official vote. There was only discussion, but no vote because there was no quorum at that time.
All right, we'll open this matter for discussion amongst others. Motion, the chair will adopt them, will accept any motions that's put forth at this time regarding whether or not the letters from a complainant that's sent to a respondent should also be sent to the complainant. The letters that's sent to the respondent. Is there a motion before this board at this time regarding whether or not the letters sent to a respondent should also be sent to a complainant, a potential complainant? Okay. If there's no motion before this board, is there any discussion on this matter at all? Anyone that wants to discuss this matter?
I would just like to.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
I would like to, and I'm trying to think what happened that day when we didn't have the quorum and we met. I think that the issue is, in my mind, has been we're subject to the Open Meetings Act. Individuals from the public can come and sit in on these meetings. They can watch them on YouTube, I guess. We send a letter out to the respondent. We send a letter out to the complainant. Part of the rationale for my discussion in the past was based on my familiarity with the state disciplinary agencies. In the attorney disciplinary field, for example, if a letter is sent to a respondent lawyer and they're told that the file is being closed, the complainant gets a copy of that letter, not a similar letter, not a like letter. They get the letter. If that attorney is admonished or cautioned, that letter goes to the attorney, but it's copied to the complainant. And I think that my feelings were that since we're subject to the Open Meetings Act, why would we send a letter out? If we're not sending just one letter that covers both the complainant and the respondent and advises them of why we're taking no action or what action or why the rationale for whatever we're doing, that both parties should be told that. But in one unique case that we had lately, we did something a little bit different. We did two letters to the parties. We did a letter to the complainant. We did a letter to the respondent. We never requested an answer from the respondent. We just wrote to the respondent and said, this is why we're closing it. We sent a letter to the complainant. We said, look, this is why we're closing it. So there were two different letters. And then there were long protracted discussions by the complainant and multiple requests for a copy of the letter that was sent to the respondent in that case. So my motion, I can't point to any legal authority that says we have an obligation to do that. I can't point to anything necessarily in the ethics code that says we have an obligation to inform both parties of what we're doing. It's just, it's part of the Open Meetings Act. It's public. People could actually hear what we decided and what we asked go into the letters. So for all those reasons, I made the motion and I'll renew it here today. I really believe that in situations where we don't just send out one letter to both the respondent and the complainant, where it's one identical letter informing them of what happened, we send out two letters. I think they should go to both parties. That would be my motion.
Okay, we have a motion before the floor. The motion is to, if there's a letter sent regarding a complaint or file from a party, the action taken on that complaint or no action taken as sent to the respondent of the complaint should also be copied and sent to the complainant. That's the motion that's before this floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hammoud. At this time, Mr. Thomas, do you want to open up for discussion?
Yes, I do.
You lead the way, sir.
No, I'll defer to Dr. Carnell. I see her hand being raised.
Okay, Dr. Carnell.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I just want to make sure this addresses Mr. Longstreet's concern.
With all due respect, I don't have a concern. It was just kind of like, I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that there was still old business remaining and what that old business was. I don't have an opinion either way.
Okay, thank you.
From the chair, I'm just going to ask, are you saying, Mr. Thomas, that if there's a complaint and this board decides that the complaint is not within the jurisdiction of this board, and we notify the respondent or the complainant that it's not within the jurisdiction of this board, and therefore we're dismissing it, and we notify the respondent of that complaint that, bless you, that a complaint was filed? Is that what you're suggesting, that should be the case?
The closing letters, I'm going to refer to them, clarify what I said by closing letters. We're sending out closing letters. I think that both parties should get, where possible, I would think one letter, but if not possible, if we want to say different things to the respondent and the complainant, there's two letters, send them to both parties.
Would that include any additional letters this board sends to a possible respondent? So if I understand on that particular case, a letter was sent to this particular respondent suggesting some possible changes, would that letter also be sent to the complainant?
That's not part of my motion. That's not part of my motion. I was referring to the closing letters.
Just the
I don't
closing
think
letter.
that our hands should be tied one way or the other if we have follow-up with one of the parties. I'm talking about the dispositional letters that went out in that particular case, that they should be exchanged.
Just making sure we're
Yep.
clear. So any additional letters this board sends to a party, responding or any action this board may suggest or recommend is not a part of your motion, that also be sent to the complainant.
Yes, in that particular case, just so that we're clear, Ms. Hammoud and I worked on two letters with Mr. Longstreet. They were approved by the full board at its next meeting. One letter went to the complainant, one letter went to the respondent. They were different letters. We said different things in both letters. Those letters that I'm talking about, those dispositional letters, I am not talking about follow-up letters. For example, if a complainant wrote and had further questions and we had Mr. Longstreet correspond with that individual, my motion does not cover that follow-up letter. My motion concerns what I'm referring to as the dispositional letter. This file is being closed. This is why it's being closed.
But you just mentioned that the letters that you worked on were different letters.
They were different letters. They were not one letter like the disciplinary agencies in the state uses.
But since there were different letters sent to both parties, does a party get a copy of the letter that was sent to the opposing party?
Yes, that's my motion. That's exactly the motion that I discussed when we didn't have a quorum, and that's the motion that I'm making here today. And I should say this, when those letters, on the date that they were approved regarding what was going to be said, there was interaction between Ms. Hammoud and I, and we said on the open record that it's being recorded and publicized what was going to go in the letter. We just fine-tuned it. I think it's all part of the Open Meetings Act, really. That's the way I perceive it, at least. Maybe others feel differently.
Yes, Dr. Carnell.
Sorry if I missed this. We're just talking about this particular circumstance, correct?
Well, we're talking about this circumstance, but this would be for all future circumstances.
And
This is the
is
situation.
this something that should be in the ordinance? I don't know how we make a motion that is binding for other topics without it being written somewhere. So it appears to be situational at this time.
Sure, the ordinance speaks to this. Does the ordinance speak to this at all? With respect to a complaint filing, a complainant filing complaint, and you know the respondent gets a copy of the complaint and is allowed to respond. It doesn't speak to the closing documents.
I agree. And we also added information where the ordinance did not speak to prior to the amendments, right? So I propose that this be situational and not I don't know how we can bind future decisions on this motion.
Longstreet, you want to add to that, sir? If that's something that we could do by vote, or is that something that needs to be adopted into the ordinance itself?
The ordinance does tell you how to respond when the board has requested a response from the respondent. The statute or the ordinance is silent on the issue in regards to what Mr. Thomas has just proposed. I believe it should probably be an amendment to the statute, since the statute tells us how to operate in certain situations. So my suggestion would be that the vote by Mr. Thomas be one that is situational, and then the board can consider adding that language in the future, which I think is the appropriate thing to do, by the way. I think that should also be added into the statute so that future boards know how to act, because it's in the law on what to do, or at least minimally in the ethics board operating procedure.
I'm sold. I'll make it situational here today for the one file that we've been concerned with over the last several meetings. And if language needs to be added for the future, and not only that, but what we all have to take notice of. Well, I've only been on the board for a couple of years now. This is the very first time that this issue has ever arisen. So I will withdraw my motion if necessary, and I will make a new motion that, based upon the situation that we're dealing with here, that was Reverend Taylor's situation where he requested a copy.
Hey, Mr. Thomas, I'm gonna stop you just for one quick minute. So there was a motion before this board. The motion was seconded. The person who made the motion now wishes to make a motion to withdraw that motion. Okay. My understanding in Robert Rules Law, once it's been seconded and discussion has been allowed, we either have to have a vote. I'm not sure if we can do a motion to withdraw before there's a vote. Mr. Longstreet?
I would believe that the board would need to vote simply no, and then just repropose the motion in its proper form.
So at this time, there's a motion before the board. That motion, the call of the motion was read. It was a motion to file, and that complaint, the disposition of that complaint, the closing documents of that complaint should both be sent to the respondent as well as the complainant. That motion was seconded. There was discussion on the motion. At this time, the motion, we must both vote on the motion. So at this time, we're going to vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. All opposed to the motion indicate by saying no.
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 Those have it. The motion fails. Now, I think, Mr. Thomas, you would like to make another motion at this time, or are you saying?
Yes, in order to clear up the matter that we've had pending for several months now, I would make a motion that the letters that were sent to the parties, the letter that was sent to the complainant, Dr. Reverend Taylor, and the letter that was sent to the sheriff's office be exchanged. That Reverend Taylor get a copy of what was sent to the sheriff's office, and that the sheriff's office get a copy of the letter that was sent to Reverend Taylor. That's my motion. Does that satisfy the situation?
So the call of the motion is to, with respect to the Reverend Taylor matter, with respect to the complaint that was filed and the closing letters, the motion has been made that the closing letters sent to Mr. Reverend Taylor, as well as to the sheriff's office, that those letters be exchanged between both parties. That is the motion before this floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this matter? All right, we put this matter before a vote. All in favor of the motion that's before this board indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying no. Ayes have it, so moved. This letter should be going to both parties. Moving on to the next item of our agenda, which is item under new business. We have item number 1 is a FOIA request from Donald Kolhanek in the response regarding communication about Mamata Burji. Mr. Longstreet, I'm going to turn this over to you because I believe that you had some response to this FOIA request. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the FOIA, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I did receive a FOIA request from the commission requesting that I send a copy of Ms. Burgie's letter in regards to her request for an ethics opinion. I sent that to I believe I sent that to Ms. Johnson. And I believe Ms. Johnson took care of it from there. I think she properly responded to the FOIA request, sent the FOIA request to its the person who requested the FOIA information. That's all the information I have at this time on that particular action.
I think that response was disseminated too amongst all members. Ms. Johnson's response to the FOIA request, I believe it was provided to Mr. Burji, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Any further discussion on this matter? Is there a recommendation on this matter, Mr. Longstreet?
In reference to the FOIA request, I think there really is no recommendation. I think the board recommended that we advise, I think it's Mr. or Mrs. Burji, that they could ask for if there was a concern in regards to any ethics violation or ethics opinion that they requested. That letter was sent off. The FOIA request was responded to. I don't think there's anything else to discuss.
Okay, so this matter is closed. Is that the way the chair takes it? That there's no matter to vote on or that this matter is closed?
That's correct.
So if that's, unless Ms. Johnson has anything further to add to that, we're going to consider the matter closed and off our agenda. We're going to move on to the next item of our agenda, which is item number 2. We have a complaint from a Jacqueline Jackson Broxton regarding the Wayne County Sheriff's Office foreclosure sales. Mr. Longstreet, I believe you received a copy of the complaint, as I believe all members received a copy of the complaint. Anyone have any questions or concerns at this time? I'm going to lead off with Mr. Longstreet regarding the complaint.
We did receive a complaint from Ms. Jacqueline Broxton, who is a local investor who attends the Wayne County Sheriff's Department foreclosure auction sales. I did provide all members of the board my common allegations and request for service and my response to that request. After thoroughly going through Ms. Broxton's complaint, the allegations in the complaint are rather egregious. However, the statement of facts supporting those allegations appear on their face to be speculative in nature, without any further fact finding and or evidence investigation. The only thing I could conclude at this time is that Ms. Jackson Broxton's complaint is at this point speculative and outside the scope of the Wayne County Ethics Board. There is one complaint that is directly involving her, which she believes to be misappropriation of funds that she provided to the Wayne County Ethics Board, to the Wayne County Sheriff's Department foreclosure department auctioneer. That involved $4,500 that she believes that was misappropriated. She also indicates in her complaint that there was retaliation for her making complaints in regards to that money being taken. That does fall, I believe, within the scope of the Wayne County Ethics Board. I do believe it falls under the Ethics Ordinance 404 of the Section 404 of the Wayne County Ethics Ordinance, and for the purposes of answering that particular allegation alone, I believe it is appropriate for the Wayne County Ethics Board to ask of the Wayne County Sheriff's Department foreclosure auction sales department to directly address that issue.
And I take it just from the chair that the respondent received a copy of the complaint.
Not at this time because the board hasn't determined whether to send that person a copy of the complaint or not.
Discussion from the board at this time regarding Ms. Jackson Broxton's complaint. So Longstreet, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation at this time is to request from the Wayne County Sheriff's Department Sheriff Foreclosure Auction Sales Department to respond to the specified allegation in Ms. Jackson Broxton's complaint, which is outlined in my opinion and recommendation.
That response, that would start the 7-day process to respond to the complaint. Is that?
That's correct. I believe it. Yes.
All right. So is there a motion to adopt Mr. Longstreet's recommendation regarding Ms. Braxton's complaint regarding the specific issues that address the ethics ordinance violations in her complaint? Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt Mr. Longstreet's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Carnell. All in favor of adopting the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. The recommendation is carried. The motion is carried. Excuse me. Now moving on to such other matters as may be properly submitted before this board at this time. Item E, if there's any other matters before this board at this time. Okay, under item F, we're going to move along to public comments. If there's any public comments at this time. Public comments from anyone in the audience. Okay,
Through the chair, there are no hands raised on Zoom.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
There are no hands raised on Zoom for public comments.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Spivey. All right, at this time, the chair is going to move to adjournment. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn.
There a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned until next month, November